Hello today, my name is Luke Hinsley and I aspire to run as an independent in the upcoming Australian federal election for the electorate of Corio. At the next election, Australians will be voting for the future of the country, not just of who the leader will be, but what vision we have for our future direction, of who we are as Australians and what we value, and potentially locking in that path for the next generation. And the choices we're given are frankly underwhelming. It's progress by inches or regress by miles, hardly an inspiring choice. I want to offer an alternative outlook, a vision for the future of Australia, one where climate change is acted upon as the existential threat that it is, one where the resources of our nation are used to build and better not only ourselves, but the world around us, where government takes an active role in addressing the issues of the day rather than waiting for them to become a crisis. A future that acknowledges and reconciles the sins of our past for the sake of creating a shared identity that includes the first Australians before us and the next Australians after. This is possible because we live in a democracy. We, the people, get to elect who we want to represent us and our values. The government works the way it does because we allow it, and it will change when we demand it. If you would like to know more details of myself, my policies and vision, please stick around. My name is Luke Hinsley and I aspire to run as an independent candidate for the electorate of Corio in the upcoming Australian federal election. I want to talk a little bit about why I'm doing this and why I think I'm a good candidate. Firstly, I'm not an elite. I'm actually starting from poverty. I'm filming this on my phone, so I know what it's like to struggle with the cost of living. I see it firsthand. I believe in social welfare reforms to lift people out of poverty and provide high-quality public services. I believe housing is a human right, that education should be free, and that we need far greater action on climate change. I see myself as a problem solver. When faced with a problem, my brain seeks to find solutions. I've spent almost the last 3 years at university studying politics, policy studies, and international relations to better understand where the problems lie. I've put myself in tens of thousands of dollars of student debt just to educate and better myself for the task ahead. I've completed an associate degree and I'm working on a bachelor's degree. For most of my life, I worked in retail. I worked hard, I did the heavy lifting, and for that I got a spinal injury and had a mental breakdown. I understand that the world where hard work got you ahead largely doesn't exist anymore, and there's a real need for more expansive health care, including mental and dental care. Full disclosure, I have depression. I have dysthymia, which is a persistent low-level depression, so I'm not really an excitable person. I've had some deeper bouts of depression too. A major contributor to that has been a profound lack of hope for the future, which is another reason why I want to run, to give people hope that there is someone trying to fix the problems in our system so that we can all have a better future. I don't have any children, but I've been an uncle since I was 15, which set a hard line for me of where the next generation of the family began and where my generation has a duty of care. I love my nibblings. They are my reason for being. I want to save the world for them. I'm the kind of person who likes to help. If I can do something small that requires little to no effort on my part but will improve someone else's day, I'll typically do it, even if they never know I did. I'm not the kind of person who would normally do this though, so I don't have the connections needed and I struggle to ask for help, which brings me here. I'm one person alone yelling into the void, but I'm raising my hand and saying I'm willing to devote the rest of my life to this. Though I can't do it alone, I need help in whatever way you can. The election of Trump brings the risk of a worldwide pivot to the right, to authoritarianism. We need to bring a counterbalance to the left, to social democracy, to empowering people, to not just give hope that a better future is possible, that there is a light in this dark timeline, but to give a vision of what that could look like. Let's first talk about what's being offered in this upcoming election. Opposition leader Peter Dutton, colloquially known as the Babadook, seen here in his native habitat, sowing terror in the hearts of Australian children, has a plan to bring nuclear power to Australia. There's only one small problem. It's all bullshit. His plan has us building and operating nuclear reactors without the knowledge base, local expertise, or supply chains needed, and doing so quicker and cheaper than building renewables. It doesn't factor in cost overruns or delays from local opposition, which always happen, and the reactors won't produce as much electricity as the renewables under Labor's plan. It's a farce. It won't work, and he knows it. It's all a scam to keep coal burning for decades longer before we have an actual transition. The Liberal National Coalition will argue against renewables, saying, "What about when the sun doesn't shine or the wind doesn't blow?" completely ignoring the susceptibility to extreme heat of coal and nuclear. If it gets too hot, coal-fired power plants have to shut down or risk exploding. Nuclear plants need a constant supply of water for cooling, but if the temperature of the water is too high, it no longer provides adequate cooling and they have to shut down or risk exploding. Now I ask you, what is more likely to happen in Australia as the world gets warmer? The sun doesn't shine, or it gets bloody hot? Dutton and the Liberal Party represent the identity of colonial Australia, of ignoring the atrocities of our past and hoping they will go away. Dutton has stated that he'll refuse to stand in front of the Indigenous flags, that there is only one flag of Australia, a flag that coincidentally contains the flag of a foreign colonial empire. The Liberal Party represents an ideology that is not only stuck in the past, but idolizes it. They aspire to go backwards. Remember their stance on the voice referendum? If you don't know, vote no. A vile appeal to ignorance. Is that the direction we want for Australia? Now, Labor under Prime Minister Anthony Albanese is far superior when it comes to climate change and the environment, but that's a low bar in comparison. There is plenty of room to do better and in more policy areas, such as towards the end of 2024 when the Albanese government passed legislation that would ban most social media apps for children under the age of 16 under the guise of protecting children. That was just a bullshit excuse. Say what you will about the negative effects of social media, of the algorithmic manipulation and the haven for disinformation that comes from delivering people their own individualized version of reality. The ban was not about protecting children. It was about controlling access to information, to limit them to mainstream sources and narratives. It was the same for the TikTok ban in the US. Both sides, Republican and Democrat, voted together for that ban, and both sides in Australia, Liberal and Labor, voted together for this ban. Bipartisanship is supposed to be a good thing, but it's become a red flag. When both major parties are in lockstep together, it's very rarely ever for something that will benefit the people. Liberals and Labor voted together to not raise Centrelink payments above the poverty line. They voted together for electoral reforms that let political parties spend enormously more money on elections than individual candidates can. They both have a policy of not discussing on-water matters when it comes to people seeking asylum. It's all about control. Now, I agree with protecting people from social media, though that comes through regulation, not bans. There needs to be parental guidelines about when it's age appropriate for children to use digital devices and restrictions to features they have access to. As someone who has had their data compromised in multiple leaks, I would love to see legislation to protect user data. That's highly unlikely to happen though, as the political parties harvest our data too. They use it for advertising and micro-targeting. Do you think they would vote to take that tool away from themselves? Social media has its flaws, which largely comes from our profit-driven capitalistic society and its need to monetize everything. We need proper, well-researched regulations and government not driven by self-interest. What this ban seemingly doesn't consider is that these kids have grown up with social media. They've known only a world where everyone was connected all the time. They were born in the digital age. Trying to sever that connection could inadvertently cause untold trauma. This is the metaphorical stuffing the cat back in the bag rather than trying to find a way to move forward with the new reality. If you don't understand it, just ban it. Another area where the Liberals and Labor see eye to eye, AUKUS. The Trilateral Security Agreement of AUKUS is the worst deal in Australian history, perhaps the worst deal in human history. Australia is giving $368 billion for up to 8 nuclear-powered submarines. That's over $1/3 trillion of the Australian people's collective wealth being shipped overseas to the US and UK for up to 8 submarines. We have a guaranteed delivery of 0. There's half a dozen points in the fine print whereby the US president can unilaterally deny delivery. And what are the odds that America First US President Donald Trump will prioritize Australia? They're not just building subs for us, they're also building them for themselves, and they're behind schedule in production. If the president thinks the US needs them more, we get nothing. $1/3 trillion for nothing? Worse than nothing, in fact. The Liberals under Morrison signed this insanely moronic deal, but Labor under Albanese expanded it. We will now also be taking the nuclear waste of the US and UK and storing it on our soil. $1/3 trillion, and the only thing we might get in return is nuclear waste? Bootlickers, both sides. That's just pillar 1 though. Pillar 2 is joint capacity building, but again, it's the fine print that gets you. Any technology developed under AUKUS, even if it's by Australian scientists in Australian labs using Australian funding, by default it belongs to the US. I would say that we sold our sovereignty, but we didn't sell it. We're paying to have it taken from us. And the whole thing is deeply antagonistic towards China, which is our largest two-way trading partner. We import and export more to China than any other nation. Our prosperity is largely built on Chinese commerce. And we're going to throw that away for the sake of American empire? For the sake of Donald Trump's ambitions of territorial expansion? But it's not too late. That money is not sent all at once. We still have a chance to cancel this deal. Even if we lose everything we've already sent, we could still save most of that money and invest it in building Australia. We can determine that we are not a colony to be harvested by a foreign empire. But I ask you, who are we as Australians? Who do we want to be? I believe that Australia should be an independent republic, but I don't think we're ready for that yet. Now, I don't mean we still need a king, we don't, but part of becoming an independent nation is self-determination, where we collectively decide who we are, what we value, and where we see our place in the world. In my opinion, we haven't done that yet. Australia is still very divided. The Liberals see us as a colony to be harvested of every last finite resource until all that is left is a lifeless rock. Nothing renewable, nothing long-term. Worship at the altar of foreign imperial powers and deny the 65,000 years of history before white people got here. The Labor Party is noticeably better. Sure, they're under the boot of foreign imperial powers too, but at least they're trying to build long-term. They're building renewables. They value reconciliation. They gave the apology for the stolen generations. They tried with the voice referendum. They're just kind of feckless when in government. They're afraid of going too far with progress. Not afraid of the people, they're afraid of Murdoch, of the media backlash which can and does cost them government. They're afraid that if they think too independently, we could have another Labour government double dissolution. And rather than challenge this power dynamic, they accept it and work within the imposed limitations. Is that who we want to be? Just an arm of the global West in the Pacific, governing in a way to keep billionaire oligarchs happy? We could be so much better. Australia is known as the lucky country, and we can feel that we are lucky to be here. However, the person who coined the phrase, Donald Horne, kind of meant it as an insult. Without any kind of national leadership or direction, we just kind of lucked our way into prosperity. He said, Australia is a lucky country run by second-rate people who share in its luck. Does that still ring true? I say it's time for Australia to stop relying on luck and begin preparing and planning for our future prosperity. We could be the solar capital of the world, a leader in combating climate change. We could have universal free healthcare, universal free public education, universal social housing, universal basic income, the kinds of social programs people dream of. We could have proper reconciliation with Indigenous Australians, acknowledge and own the sins of our past, chart a future for all of us together, and in doing so, forge an identity for all Australians, one that encompasses the first Australians before us and the next Australians after. Not one of the colonial past, not one of modern half measures. Rather than be an arm of the West, we could be the voice of the South, the balance between the collectivist East and the individualist West, rather than bandwagoning and warmongering for one side. What might that Australia look like? Australia has one of the greatest solar potentials of anywhere in the world. Each year we receive 10,000 times more solar radiation than it would take to power our entire civilization. Now, we cannot possibly harvest all of that, even if we covered the entire continent in solar panels. The technological capacity just doesn't exist. There are a few places in the world that have solar potential better than us, but what we have that they typically don't is political stability. Yes, there was an alleged CIA-backed coup that oversaw the dismissal of the democratically elected Labour Whitlam government, but that was in 1975. We've mostly been stable since then. Solar is one of the cheapest forms of electricity generation, and it's only getting cheaper. Combine this with our solar potential and it's like playing a game with cheat codes. Knowing this and choosing to invest in nuclear, which is still one of the most expensive forms of electricity generation, is idiocy. The point here is that we have the potential to build a solar renewable electricity grid that could not only power us completely today, but cover any future needs as well. We could make electricity so abundantly available that the thought of charging any household or business for it would be laughable, like charging for air. Long term, no electricity bills ever again. Who in politics has that vision? And how many energy-intensive industries would electrify and move to Australia for free electricity? How do we make money from it if it's free? We export it. We can run undersea cables to Indonesia and help power them. Indonesia has 10 times our population and is predicted by 2050 to become the 4th largest economy in the world. We could power their growth with Australian electricity, ensuring continuous foreign investment here and that we grow with them. We could not only cut our greenhouse gas emissions, but we could help Indonesia cut theirs too, and punch well above our weight in combating climate change. If we can overcome the technical limitations for longer distance transmission, we could potentially island hop Indonesia into Asia and beyond. We could become an economic powerhouse and combat climate change while doing it. We just need the political will to make it happen. I'm concerned a lot about climate change because the topic is somewhat personal for me. As such, I was almost going to cut this part out, lest it feel manipulative. Climate change is the greatest threat to our species. It's like a slow burn extinction level event, and we collectively are not doing enough to address it. But government is the only institution on the planet with the power and resources to adequately combat it. So we need people in government that take it deadly serious. I assure you, I do. Now I know you can't say that any one single weather event is attributable to climate change, but the odds of extreme weather events occurring are increasing because of it. And it's not just heat waves, droughts, and floods. In 2018, I lost my home when a mini tornado hit it and partially tore off the roof, damaging the structure and leaving it uninhabitable. It was extreme in that it struck in suburban Geelong. It hit a block of 5 joined units and only damaged 2 of them. And no other homes in the area were damaged, although insulation from the roof was scattered throughout the neighborhood. I was home when it happened. It was a surreal thing to witness. You're immediately aware of what's happening and how helpless you are to do anything about it. But it's also so far outside the realm of anything you've experienced that your mind also can't quite make sense of it either. All you can do is wait for it to be over and then assess the situation. My first thought after was, fuck! Now I'm gonna have to pack up my shit and move. Which is not a healthy mindset, but I was deeply depressed at the time. Suffice to say, I take climate change very bloody seriously. My desire to run for office is not just to save the world from climate change, but to give people some hope for the future, that there is at least one person in government with the goal of saving the world from climate change. But my focus in government will be greater than just one topic. In 1984, the Hawke Labor government instituted our public healthcare system, Medicare. The same year I was born, I've known only an Australia with Medicare. It's universal in that everyone gets it, but it doesn't cover everything. There's room for improvement. Since its inception, the Liberal Party has done everything they can to weaken and eliminate it, short of running on repealing it, as that is an electoral loser, and they know it. They tried to add an upfront fee to see your GP and faced massive backlash for it, so they tinker around the edges and never act directly. They didn't keep reimbursements up to date with rising costs, making it harder for doctors to continue bulk billing. The Howard Liberal government legislated a lifetime health cover loading that increases your hospital premiums by 2% every year if you don't have private health insurance by age 31. How many private sector goods or services does the government legislatively punish you for not purchasing? How is that acceptable? And Labor has done a shitty job of defending Medicare from the Liberals. There was a period of about 5 years under Liberal governance where I had to change my doctor multiple times because the clinics I attended kept going private, as they couldn't afford to keep bulk billing. Since Labor has taken government, every budget year on year they've talked about strengthening Medicare, a meaningless buzzword. They're not talking about fully funding it, they're not talking about expanding it, just strengthening it. Do you know how many of those clinics that went private have now returned to Medicare after Labor's strengthening? 0. Australians deserve a fully funded universal healthcare system that covers mental and dental health care, hospital stays, and specialists. Some things, like healthcare, are too important to leave to the profit motive driven private sector. Public welfare, the public good, is more important. Labor needs to realise that the strength of Medicare is its universality. When everybody gets it, no one will let you take it away. Give people health care, give people housing, lift millions of Australians out of poverty, and make the Liberals run on taking it away. See how far they get. Have you ever wondered why, when it comes to spending money on things politicians want, like millions of dollars for car parks and sports stadiums in their electorates, or billions for the military, we seemingly have plenty of money to spread around, but when it comes to something that might provide a public benefit, they ask, how are we going to pay for it? What about the debt? It's bullshit, right? I'll tell you why. We have been thoroughly propagandized to believe that a government budget is just like a household budget. It is not. In a nation like Australia, we have a sovereign currency, the Australian dollar. Every debt, deficit and interest payment we have is in Australian dollars. The Australian government is the issuer of the currency. They can never run out of it. This is the basis of modern monetary theory. This doesn't mean that we have unlimited money though. The government grows the economy by putting money into it through investments and subsidies and takes money out through taxation. But if it puts too much money into the economy, the value of the currency drops, prices rise, and we get higher inflation. However, we can counter that by taking money back out of the economy, specifically by raising taxes on the rich, those who can most afford to pay them. We can create the money to fund healthcare, education, welfare, infrastructure, housing, whatever we need. If a resource exists, we can create the money to activate it. We just need a government who wants to do it. What about the debt? Future generations have to pay that. When though? There's no set date that it has to be paid by, and it's our debt in our currency. We essentially owe it to ourselves. Are we going to call it in and crash our own economy? Not likely. We could even legislate that it has to be paid off in 10,000 years, at which point, who would care? We live in one of the richest countries in the world, during the wealthiest time in human history. If we cannot afford to do these kinds of social reforms now, when will we ever be able to? And who will bring the change? The Liberals are ideologically opposed to it, and Labor lacks the spine to even try. Increasing the debt isn't the only way to procure funding. In Australia, the tax system is largely skewed towards benefiting the rich and businesses. In Australia, businesses only pay tax on profit, not revenue. We have transnational corporations earning billions of dollars in revenue in Australia, but through accounting tricks like consultancy fees and offshore tax havens, they never realize profit and therefore never have to pay tax. Billion-dollar companies pay less tax than their employees. As a result of this, the Australian government is overly reliant on personal income taxes for its revenue, which is why successive governments have, for decades, demonized the unemployed as dole bludgers leeching off the taxpayer, and why Centrelink keeps payments below the poverty line, denies disability pensions to those in need, and harasses people to get jobs. Yet the biggest welfare queens are the rich. They get subsidies, tax breaks, financial policies that benefit them. They use all of the infrastructure that taxes build while giving as little as possible back. If you're rich and take money from the government, you're a savvy businessman. But if you're poor and do the same, you're the lowest form of life. Neither of the major parties are going to change this. They've worked together to make it this way. We need tax reform in Australia to make businesses pay tax on revenue. They can have a tax-free threshold like personal incomes do. It could even be a percentage instead of a fixed dollar amount, but they need to pay their fair share. This alone would raise billions in revenue for the government and could fund all sorts of reforms for the public good. We could even add ultra-wealth tax brackets and close the loopholes that let the rich hide their obscene wealth, and give the Australian Tax Office the resources it needs to go after the biggest tax cheats. People might not like taxes, but they pay for the infrastructure and public services that we all need, use, and rely upon. It's time for those that have the most to start paying their fair share. As you might imagine from the policy positions I've shared, like cancelling AUKUS or taxing the rich, I don't expect to be positively received by the mainstream establishment. I fully expect to be vilified by them, and I'm not going to shy away from it. I will embrace being their villain, the villain to the special interest groups that have captured the government. I will speak truth to power and call the bullshit out on your behalf. Now, different political parties and independents use colours as their identifiers. Liberals are blue, Labor is red, Greens is in the name. There are teal independents as Liberal lights, and there's orange and maroon independents as variations on red. The colour I choose is black. I wear mostly black. It resonates with me, and I see my run as a black flag campaign. It's a call for change. We raise the black flag as a rebellion, as a declaration of independence and hostility towards a corrupted system. It's about doing things differently, being unconventional in the approach. It will be social media led, as that's where people can truly and freely express themselves. The major parties have rigged the electoral system in their favour in regards to funding, but those laws only apply to political parties and registered candidates. As an independent, I can't register until an election is called. As of yet, it hasn't been, so those laws do not currently apply to me. Any money I raise online as an aspiring candidate, although not tax deductible, has no limits, and I will use it to build local awareness and support within my electorate. Let me be clear, the symbolism of a black flag campaign runs deeper than just visuals. My electorate, Corio, is seen as a safe Labor seat. Labor has held it since 1967. That's 58 years. The current MP, Richard Marles, has held the seat since November 2007, almost 18 years of incumbency. He's the Deputy Prime Minister, the second highest elected office in the land, and the Minister of Defence. Turning Corio from Labor to Independent would be a shot across the bow to all politicians that none of their seats are safe. It doesn't matter how long you've been in office or how high up the hierarchy you've climbed, you are not untouchable. It won't be easy, but it wouldn't be much of a message if it was. We voters are not to be taken for granted. Politicians work for us. You are meant to represent the people's will, and if you won't do it, then we can vote for someone who will. It's no longer just a choice between red or blue. It's time to raise the black. Now, I've talked a lot about my lofty ambitions, things I not only believe in, but I think will appeal to voters. The thing is, if you run on too many things, people might not really be sure what you're running for. It can be difficult to narrow it down. If everything is highlighted, then nothing is, which is why I have my platform, a handful of policies that I will take to my electorate, one of which I will discuss now. I believe that long-term, a universal basic income will become a necessity for the continuing function of our society, but I don't think that popular opinion is there yet, and certainly not the political will for it. So, what I want to do is build evidence for the potential benefits of such a system by doing a trial run in my electorate of Corio of a narrower policy. I want to raise the rate of Centrelink payments in Corio to above the poverty line to determine the effects it has on poverty rates, crime rates, the economy, and people's health and well-being. I think my electorate is the perfect location. As of 2024, we have 3 of Victoria's top 10 most disadvantaged suburbs, including the #1 spot of Norlane, where I live. The suburb of Corio, which is number 8 and has the same postcode as Norlane, has a reputation in Geelong. It's where the Centrelink office is, so there's a higher number of unemployed people, disabled people, retired people, and newly arrived Australians. Because of a higher number of people on Centrelink poverty, local businesses can struggle as their customer base doesn't have disposable income. I believe by raising the Centrelink rates, we could not only improve people's lives and ease the cost of living crisis, but also create a local economic boom. Now, it may require anti-gouging measures for grocery prices and rent controls. It might even include a trial of a 4-day work week for the same pay if that becomes necessary. The point will be to make it adaptable. We can make it work. I want to do this for you, Corio. If you give me a chance with your vote, I will give you my loyalty with my actions. The parliamentary pay alone would be enough to change my life, and I would want to give that change back to you. One of my more important and I believe achievable policy positions that I have on my platform is direct ballot initiatives. Variations of this policy already exist in other jurisdictions, and what it does is adds an issue of importance to the electoral ballot for voters to decide on during elections. Studies have shown that voters have little sway over the policies that governments enact. It's typically special interest groups and lobbyists that determine government actions. Direct ballot initiatives would give some power back to the people. How it could work would be that issues of importance could be decided through a means like an online parliamentary petition, such as former Prime Minister Kevin Rudd's parliamentary petition for a royal commission into Murdoch media, which only resulted in a Senate inquiry. A petition like that could add the option to the ballot for voters to decide on, which would be independent of who you vote for and would be binding on whomever forms government, even if they ideologically oppose it, because it's about responding to the will of the people, which is what democracy is supposed to be about. It's a progressive policy that seeks to empower voters, so it would be very telling who in politics would oppose it. You may have noticed my differing t-shirts. These are not just props for videos, they're my actual clothes. I want to tell you a little story that relates to who I am as a person. It takes place during the COVID pandemic when Victoria was in frequent lockdowns. During one of the periods when lockdowns were lifted, my family came together for dinner, something we otherwise regularly do. We were discussing how things had changed, and I mentioned how strange I found it when I would go out and do my grocery shopping. There would be hardly any people around, and everyone would be wearing masks and socially distancing. The strange thing for me, though, would be that people would make positive comments about the t-shirts I was wearing, but they weren't anything special. They were just regular Star Wars shirts that I got from Kmart. My sister commented that she thought people were feeling isolated and were looking for any reason to make a social connection with another human being. Now, I'm a shy introvert. I'm not good at making that outreach social connection. I can be awkward, but what I can do is wear a funny or interesting t-shirt and have that be an opportunity for someone else to make that connection. Even if it's just, hey, I like your shirt, and me replying, thanks. It's one of those small things you can do for other people, and even though I do this intentionally, it still catches me off guard when it happens. Now, I guess wearing these shirts has become part of my identity. I'm not just some guy who wants money or power. I'm a human being just like you. I want to use my drive, my ambition, my skills and values to make the world a better place in the biggest possible way I can. With your help, together, we could save the world. My name is Luke Hinsley, aspiring independent candidate for Corio. Please like, comment, share all the social media things, links below, and I thank you for your time.